Do you think that in this day and age, parents would have to struggle talking to their kids about sexuality, pornography, dealing with that, and then that would affect obviously family dynamics?
Absolutely.
Communication.
Yeah. Look, a lot of parents, the word that I get back from parents is they find it really hard to engage with their kids. And there are a number of reasons for that. Once they hit their teenagers, it's typical of teenagers trying to separate. They want more responsibility. They're finding out who they are. They've really taken on the identity of their parents for so long, and now they're trying to find their identity and who they really are and what their values are and what their rights and wrongs are. And so there's this natural separation, and parents find that very difficult, and there's tension. There's natural tension, and that's part of life, and you can't change that, but you can certainly implement certain things to make that a little bit easier. And that is, number one, communicate from a very young age with your children. Be good communicators. Create opportunities where you are communicating. Family meals. Make that a tradition in the home and don't break it. Imagine having family meals 5 days a week and giving 2 days off. There's opportunities then to communicate with a child, you know what I mean? But as soon as they hit teenage years, and if you're not a good communicator, they're just going to communicate even less. And if you try and impose your will on them or your ideas, they're just going to resist, because peer pressure is huge. You can have a child that wants to be loved, accepted and belong, right? They'll find that with their peers, not their parents. So they'll compromise the very values they have to have the group love them, and so they can feel belonged and accepted by that group. And so it's very, very important from an early age, from the age of 5, 4, whatever, to communicate your value systems to your kids, and that continues until they leave home. And even when they do leave home and they come over to your place and you're still communicating, they need to see those values. You want to be a good role model. And so I think that's number one key, creating opportunities to communicate. And having the knowledge, I can say to my kid, don't take drugs and don't drink. Don't know why. What do I say then? But if I read a book on why and understand how drugs work in the brain and how alcohol works with a young brain, I then have the ability to communicate in such a way where the kid says, you know what, mum and dad's real clever, they know what they're talking about. Even though they might still rebel and go and do it, at least they know. If you build a foundation at home of good values and virtues, when they do rebel, and some do, a majority of teenagers do, at least they've got a road to come back to. But if there's nothing built, where do they come back to? They've got nowhere to come back to. You follow what I'm saying? So it's very important that you establish virtues and values in a home environment, but it starts very young, and it's creating those opportunities. And I think the other thing too is, and this is one that you will agree with, is a lot of parents need to understand their position. I don't think that a lot of parents understand their position, because I didn't for a very long time. When you bring a child into this world, you have an incredible responsibility to be a great role model for that child. So you constantly need to stand in front of a mirror and say what things, and this works in marriages as well, but what things do I need to change about myself? It's so easy to pull out the log of other people, it's easy for us to judge other people. It's important that we stand in front of the mirror and say, what do I need to change to become a better role model? And you need to be ruthless with yourself and have intent, because when you're ruthless, you can say, you know what, I've told my kid to stop swearing, but how many times have I sworn? What a hypocrite I am. Or I yell at my wife, or I yell at my partner and I'm aggressive. What sort of role model is that going to be for my children growing up? They're going to think, oh, that's normal because that's what mum and dad do. But if my kids have always said, and I was bad when they were young, but as I got older, I was a lot wiser. They look at me and they say, you know what, I know the type of man that I'm going to marry. I know how he's going to treat me because I've seen my father do it. Do you follow what I mean? And that's really, really important. We need to be great role models. So you want to create an environment, we need to stand in front of a mirror first and say, what do I need to change about myself to be a better role model? And be ruthless. Secondly, create opportunities to be able to communicate with your family. If they're going for their L's, they've got to sit next to you in a car. It never stops. Walk the dog, go on walks, make traditions when they're young. So as they get older, they just think, well, that's the norm, so we do it in our family, which they don't realise you've created those opportunities to speak to them.
So family get-togethers too.
Absolutely.
And that communication would most likely help later on in life with their partner. If it's,
of course.
If their parents are teaching them to communicate on a responsible, respectful level, that's going to help later on in the marriage communicate.
Absolutely. Because they're going to take that tradition and put it into their home. Do you follow what I mean? Look, I think one of the biggest things holding men back today in a family situation is sometimes pride. You know, a man might say, you know, I'm the man of the house or whatever. I don't know if that's an old tradition, but I hold to that view that I'm the spiritual head of my home. But the hardest thing is seeing that you're doing something wrong. You know what I mean? Imagine your teenager saying, I remember getting in the car with my daughter and she said to me, you know, Dad, in the last 3 weeks I was picking up on work and I had to go to her again. She said, all you've done is just pick her at me and you've just criticised me. You've never encouraged me. It felt like she stuck a knife in the front of me. But she was absolutely correct. Now I could have been prideful, said shut up or don't do this or whatever. But I went home and reflected on that and said, you know what, she's right. I'm not saying I do that all the time, but what I'm saying is that's what we need to do. We need to be good role models. As a man, I need to be a good role model, not only to my family, but to my work colleagues, to my church. That's a high calling. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but that's the expectation I have on myself. And I have people in my life that will say, Mark, you're doing the wrong thing. You want a friend to stab you in the front, not the back. You know, we've got too many that stab us in the back. If you have a friend that stabs you in the front, he's more concerned about how I am as a person, not his relationship with me. Do you follow what I mean? Yeah.